what is a report catalog? So a report catalog is a centralized repository with information about all the reports that you have within your organization, or at least the reports that you care to have documented or curated or certified. There's a couple approaches to this. So how do you use a catalog? So the first is sort of inventory. If you want to, you can import and synchronize like all of the reports that you have. Or you can decide that you really only want to have in there the things that are sort of documented. Both are fine ways to approach it, depending on your goals. But one reason that you might want to import everything is so that people can sort of search and locate in a central place and not have to go out to all the different places where you have reports, and they have that one place to access and run those reports, or link to where they can run that. The next step is the curation of those reports. So the inventory is just sort of bringing in that raw information. But once you have know about the existence of a report, now you can add additional context or sort of certification information, like, oh, this is an approved or valid or trusted report. Provide clarity, provide transparency, the purpose, the description. The context is like, why does this exist? What was it built for? What sort of situations do you use it? You can provide definitional things like business glossary definitions for the items on there, or other bits of information. Policy attributes, so that's like security classifications or privacy codes or data sharing agreements, information, stuff like that. Maybe you're tracking information about usage or other custom attributes around that report. But just, again, a bunch of supplemental information to help people understand and trust the reports more. The other thing you can use report catalog is for managing requests. So requests for new reports or new processes, requests for changes, a curation request. So maybe there's something that's in the inventory or not in the inventory, but it's not. There's no sort of curated content. There's nothing other than the existence of it, or it doesn't exist at all. So a request to go ahead and curate something that's already out there, or a request to access is another thing you can do. Also, it can be used for documenting something to be built. So the design and build process can be done through the catalog. And then lastly, sort of user documentation. So on the back end, it is a place that, if linked to from a report, or a place that people can access and search on their own, that can provide this additional understanding and details around the report, or allow them to submit or questions or curation requests. So it's really like taking this information and having access to the curated details, or to submit requests from the user side. So a couple ways that you can curate. One is we'll talk about the report creation process. This is a very simplified description of what might happen if someone is going to create a new report. So it might start off with the user sort of searching in that report catalog or wherever, saying, what's available. I'm looking for a particular report. Does it exist, or is there something like it? And they're, again, looking for reports. I also lump into the concept of reports. You might hear us say like a data processing report. This also can be used for data extracts or integrations, as opposed to just sort of the columnar reports or charts or graphs. Anyway, as it starts off, someone is sort of inquiring and searching in the inventory for a report, and hopefully they find what they're looking for. But if they don't, then the next thing is that they can then submit a request to have that report created, or maybe to have someone find it if it's not in the inventory. As part of that request, they're going to submit some requirements. So I'm looking for this particular report for financial aid need for this equity analysis that I'm doing, and I need this and this and this, and this is why I need it, and this is why it's important. And so I submit this request with the requirements. Now that then gets picked up by a developer or report writer, depending on the process. Maybe I'm also just doing this myself, but it gets picked up by a developer who then will kind of work on a specific details for this, or specifications for the design of this actual report, that includes clarifying the definitions of the glossary items on there. Oh, this includes need. What does that mean? Is that defined yet? Do we need to get that defined? Where am I pulling this from? What system? What is it supposed to look like? And hopefully that's iterating with the a requester to get a good requirement. Once that's kind of nailed down, then they're going to go build the actual report, and then add additional technical documentation to it. So now I've got it's in Tableau and it's using this query and from these places in the system, and then publish it out into Tableau in this case for this example. And once that's out there, then they might add additional user documentation to that for explaining to someone looking at this report what it means and how to use it, or kind of supplementing all that. So that's sort of the types of information that happens during the creation process to add a bunch of context and information. And if you can capture that in your report catalog as you're creating, you're essentially doing the curation on the fly, right? You're adding all this context as opposed to after the fact. If you did this in, without capturing the information anywhere, on paper or in some sort of repository, it gets lost. And then, 2 years from now, someone might come along and say, what is this report? Why does it exist? What does it mean? And you have to go and curate it from scratch. So if you can take the creation process and move all this stuff into the catalog, that really helps. And the cookbook is designed to do this if you're sort of running your request process through the cookbook. You build the specifications as you go, and all that's available. All right, so what is the curation process then? We just talked about the just-in-time process, but so let's say you have 1,000 reports out there. When do you want to curate? So you want to, the first thing that you want to do is maybe take your top 20 to 30 reports, mission-critical reports, and curate them looking back in time. You don't want to necessarily go and try to curate all 1,000 of your historical reports because essentially you don't know how much of that effort is going to be wasted. Who really cares about that? All 1,000 reports, and also it's a good way to make your people to quit if they have to go look back and document everything they've ever done. So if you document those mission critical reports, it provides good examples, and of course solidly curates those things that are used very regularly. Then you take a just-in-time report on what to document after that. As we just talked about, you curate things when created or changed. Or the next thing is to curate processes when there are questions on them or when there's need. So that's what we're going to talk about, this other just-in-time curation ability to say, how do you sort of create an entry point from a customer service type of focus for someone who's looking at a report and doesn't understand it to request documentation and curation on the fly at the moment that they can. And when that happens, so who's going to take that curation? Typically, it's the data steward, so it's going to route it to the appropriate functional or technical data steward, or possibly a policy steward, depending on how you've got that set up, to add context and description on a previously existing report. So here's this example. We're going to take a quick look at it. So here's this report called Applicants Aid by Program. It is, pretty looking report. It's got a bunch of information, but I have a bunch of questions like, so what does this aid offer amount exactly mean? How are they calculating these values? Is this for the current term? How are they determining that? What does it mean by active academic program? A bunch of questions that I might have on this report. So how do I know if I can trust it? So let's actually go look at this particular process. So I'm going to pull this over here. I am now sitting looking at this Tableau report. And you see, we've added this little link here. So how does this work? This is actually in Tableau. This is just an embedded frame with a single URL. And that single URL is calling a back-end piece of code that we can provide our clients that calls an API in our Data Cookbook that basically passes in the name of the report. And that's something that Tableau can do. You can basically embed dynamically the name of the report in the URL. So it's a single URL that does that. It calls this API and says, and the API is saying, is Applicants Aid by Program something that exists in the Data Cookbook as a documented report? And if it is, it comes back with this particular graphic. Now you can change this graphic. You don't have to use my design for this, but this is just saying curated report, click here for report details. It's like, so this report is curated. I can click on that. That calls our APIs and pulls back the specification details for this report, the purpose, the description, all of that stuff. So this is sort of an example of something where there is curation, and I can pull back and see the information up from that curated report. I can then click on this, and it takes me into the cookbook if I want, and I can drill down and look at more details on this report. Okay. Now, if I go back and look at the report in the overall glossary here of items, you can see all of the reports. I can do some searching. But let's look at another report. So this report is called Average Need by Program. And if I look at the cookbook here, I see it's sorted alphabetically for now. I don't have an average need by program report in the cookbook. So it's not documented. It's not curated yet. So if I go in here, when I pulled up this page, it uses the exact same link, the exact same frame with the exact same URL, passing an average need by program to that link, but it comes back with a not yet curated button. So when it called the API with the name of this report, it didn't exist. So it's displaying this button instead of the other button. And so I'm like, oh, click here to request documentation. Well, yeah, I do want some documentation. So I can click that. And instead of popping up the information about the report, it pops up this report curation request form. So it's going to go ahead and submit something. So I need more information on this report. How is it different from the applicant's aid by program report? What is it used for? Can I trust the numbers, right? And if this all looks right for me, I'm gonna go ahead and put my email here and submit it. And now it says your curation request for average need by program has been submitted. So that goes out, and we have a simple integration method that goes and to the cookbook and submits that request to document the report. So now let's go back into the cookbook here. We can go this way. Browse my specs. And if I look, oh, hey, look, there's now average need by program. So I'm going to go in and look at it. Now, there's not a lot here. It does have my comments. I need more information on this report. How is it different from the applicant? So that came in from the request that we just did. And so I'm going to go ahead and put, I'm going to do some editing here. This will have started a workflow. Now, I'm logged in as an admin, so I can do, I can do sort of everything right now, but I'm going to quickly fill in a few things. But I can do fill in the data items and all that. It actually can start the workflow and could get processed to through the workflow to the appropriate people. Let's change the functional area. Let's put this in the let's put it in financial aid. Okay. I don't like me. Remove that right now. All right, so let's go ahead and submit it. I'm doing this just so I can go ahead and get it approved for now. But you imagine this is going through a process. It'll email the appropriate stewards and take it through the step. Because I'm an admin, I'm just going to do this really quickly. I'll approve the process. I'm not putting any comments in for now. And you can have a much more simplified workflow if you want, particularly for these auto-curated items. And okay, that's it. So now I have it approved. So if I go back into Tableau and I click on and I refresh my average need by program, it's going to come back and tell me, oh, hey, this is actually a curated report. So what's happening again is that as this pulls this up, it's calling the API with the name of the report and telling, and it says, oh, it exists. So it's curated. Now I click on it, I can come back with the actual purpose and description that I just filled in. Obviously, you would want to have more in your curation than I did in those few seconds, but you see how that process works. So it's just in time, as needed, on demand documentation of your report that kicks off the workflow on the back end through the cookbook that notifies the appropriate steward to fill in the information. And you wouldn't have to do that curation if you documented it as you built it the first time and had it already curated, but it gives you an opportunity to put that there. And again, it's very simple to set this up. So quickly, I'm going to wrap up. I know we're a little over time here, but you can, at the end of this presentation, I'll talk about some links that you can go to get a copy of the deck, or some more information. We can talk about how to do this, or get a demo of our product, or just talk about data governance with us. One thing I did want to show is that this particular link, it's not specific to Tableau. You can use it in anything. Here's just sort of instructions on how to insert the link in Tableau. Tableau makes that pretty easy because you can just insert a frame, and that frame you can just associate a URL to it. I'm not, you don't actually have to put anything in there except to edit the URL. you put the URL in, you can actually include these dynamic things like the workbook name in the URL. So ultimately, this is the only thing that's on everything that we have, and this is sort of the back-end code. But the point is that every report just needs this exact same text. You don't have to swap it out, particularly if you have a feature like within Tableau where it will dynamically pass in the workbook name. And but that same link can work with any other tool.